First of all, let's remember the will center and the G center were the associated with the heart chakra, and the will center is kind of new. All right, so we're still like we still have training wheels on the whole will center thing. What the way I tend to see this manifest is the open will questions their value and they devalue themselves. And the defined will has a little bit of a different twist. So I'm actually going to back up for a second and say when we look at the G center, the open G center questions its lovability, the defined G center questions, can I be accepted for who I am? That theme is kind of mirrored a little bit in the will center. So the open will is like, am I valuable? They question their self-worth. The defined G is like, I'm afraid to talk about the things I want to talk about, to express myself. And here's what usually happens, or the experience oftentimes of the defined G. I mean, sorry, the defined will is. Let's go back and let's look at what's the voice of the defined will. So the voice of the defined will is I, right? It's the ego, it's the individuated aspect of the higher self. And its natural voice is I. And especially if you get will to the throat, these are people who are designed to talk about themselves because their experience is part of the resource that they have to offer to share with others. So if you've been with, I think if you, I don't really have any long-term students on here, but a few years ago, back before COVID, we used to have an annual human design conference that was just our people. It wasn't like the big international one. And one of my favorite people to bring to conference with me is a dear friend of mine. His name is Jim Tree Gilmore. He is an ego manifester. All he has defined is ego to the throat. He's an incredible man. He's a Native American pipe keeper. He's Cherokee. He travels the world with these Native American pipes that he's created, and he does pipe ceremony all over the world. So he's done ceremony with the leaders of Palestine and Israel. He's done, he takes these pipes and he's actually done ceremony at the United Nations. Jim talks about himself. He is a nonstop storyteller. I mean, that's his gift. I mean, he is just one story after the other, but all of his stories start with I, right? Because that's his voice. That's what he's designed to do, right? And Jim has had a lot of experiences in his life, especially in his Native American community, where he has been told to stop talking about himself, that he is not being in integrity and he's all ego and all about himself. He's so not. I mean, that is like, if you really know Jim, this is like he has no attachment to that. He just wants to help people. He's just all heart, right? But the defined ego is oftentimes accused of being in their ego because they refer or talk about themselves and their own experience. And when we are talking about ourselves and our own experience, and we're talking to people who are struggling with their own sense of value, it feels competitive. It feels like, well, why are you talking about yourself? It creates a really interesting dynamic. And so the defined will oftentimes hides out because they've gotten pushback about all you do is talk about yourself and they lose their connection to their value that way. Does that make sense? It's a really interesting, I think, symptom of us completely interpreting the concept of humility because we are trained to be humble, I think, honestly, to a fault, where we think that humility is where we erase ourselves, right? And we don't take up our right space and we don't occupy our right place. And we don't stand in the beauty and the power of who we are, whether we're open or defined in the will. And so the healing of humility and the acknowledgement of the idea that you are each and every one of you a once in a lifetime cosmic event that has a unique and vital and irreplaceable role in the cosmic plan is so important for us to integrate and heal because we can't take our right place if we're all like, oh, I'm not worthy, or we're not taking our right place because we're ashamed to talk from that place that is ours to speak from because we've been told, oh, you're just in your ego by people who are struggling with self worth. Does that make sense?